If you've never written a grant before and you don't know where to start, then this video is for you. I come across so many people who want to get better at grant writing, or they have wishes and desires to get that grant for their nonprofit, but they get stuck in their heads and they don't know where to start. So in this video, I have 5 tips that are going to be very helpful for you to figure out where to start and how to get going. Here's the first thing you got to do. Before you write any grant, know what you're writing it for and how much you need. I say this in all of my videos and including in the one I just released last week. But before you start doing any kind of fundraising, which includes grant writing, you have to know what you're raising the money for and how much you need, because that will give you direction on which funders to seek out and the number of grants you actually need to write. If you need to raise $5,000 versus $500,000, that's a major difference in the strategy that you're going to take on. And the whole point of this all is that it has to be a strategy. Sometimes people want to dabble in the grants. Oh, I heard about this one grant, so I'm going to try to write this one grant and just pray we win. But the probability of you winning grants is pretty low, especially if you are a new organization and you've never done grant writing before. I'm not saying that there aren't grants that are easier to get, but if they're easier to obtain, then it probably means they're not a lot of money and don't require a lot of effort. The problem with that is it kind of tricks your mind into thinking, well, that's all it takes. I just have to fill out this simple form and I get my $500 or I get my $1,000. And the world of grants is so much bigger and more expansive than that, and you have to open your mind. So the first thing you got to do is know for yourself, first of all, what am I writing this for? Where's the money going to go? What are the activities that I need the money to support, and how much money it is? And then when you do that, you got to figure out how many grants it's going to take for you to reach your goal. Because if you're trying to get $5,000 from grants and you go after one funder, you're more than likely not going to be as successful if you're just writing that one grant. So you have to decide for yourself, okay, in order for me to get to 5,000, well, I have to write this many grants, and on average, I'm going to ask for this amount. And I know if I write at least 25 grants, then there's a better probability that I'll get to my goal. But you can't even get to that point if you have no idea how much money you need and you have no idea what kind of activities that you want the money to support. So that's the first place to start. Ask yourself, what is the money going to be used for? How much do I need? And then how many grants I need to write. The second piece of advice is find the grant that actually fits your needs. Because I've heard people say there's a grant for everything. And I could agree with that statement. I could get behind that statement. But just like there's a grant for everything, there's also a restriction and a requirement for every single thing. So just because on the surface a grant may seem like it's a good fit for you, it may not once you get into the details of the grant. So it's really your responsibility when you find potential grants is to look at the guidelines, look at the expectations, look at what the funder has funded in the past to make sure it's the best fit. Because the worst thing you can do is spend a lot of time, and it takes people a lot of time to get ready for a grant proposal, to even get their mind right to start writing. And the worst thing you could do is do all that prep work to get ready and it not be a good fit. And you not realize that you spending that time is a big waste because they're not going to fund you anyway. So one of the first things you should do is compile a list of funders that you want to go after. From that list, I want you to look at the guidelines and see what fits your program and make sure that the money that you're asking for fits their guidelines, because you may be asking to use money in a certain way where the funder doesn't want you to spend it that way. So before you even start writing, study the guidelines, study the requirements, just take a few at a time. I recommend that you have like a prospect list, a larger list of funders, but then take 2 or 3 at a time to really dive in to understand and collect the information. And this can be a big task. So this is something you can divide up with your board, where maybe some people will develop the prospect list and do the first run through, and then someone else can go through the details, or you can break up amongst people and say, okay, each of us is going to take 3, look at the details and see if it fits for us, and then we have a final list that we're really going to go after. But the bottom line is, not every grant is going to fit your needs, and it's your responsibility once again to figure out if that's the best grant for you. Number 3, practice writing first. So I've been doing this quite a while, and some of my really early videos were around grant writing. And so if you go back to those videos, they're gonna look a little bit more busted than they do right now, but the information still applies. And one of those videos I talked about was called a common grant application. A common grant application is what funders develop when they get together. They're part of a group or a consortium, and they allow their grantees or potential grantees to use one common proposal format to submit in order to ask for funding. So instead of each individual funder having their application, they all use the same application. So it's easier on the organization when they're submitting because they're using the same format and you don't have to readjust every time you apply for a new grant. Well, common grant applications are readily available for you to see and study. What I recommend you do is practice writing a grant first to get a feel for the kind of questions you're going to be asked, typically in a grant proposal. And one of the best ways to find those typical questions is in a common grant application. And it also helps get you in the mind of where is a funder? Like, what are the kind of things they want to know? What kind of questions are they asking? So you can get your mind right about how to position yourself in a proposal. So many times when people go after grant writing and just fundraising in general, they center themselves and they center what they understand about the process instead of what the funder or the donor needs from them. If somebody is trying to make a decision about whether or not they should fund you over somebody else, because mind you, there are other organizations that are applying for funding, then you need to position your work, your program in a certain way that you want that funder not to overlook you, because if they did, it would be a problem, right? But too many times you go after and you're like, well, I don't want to say this, I don't want to be too bold, or I just want to talk about all the work that we do. And you start drafting a proposal based on what you want them to know, based on how you feel, instead of what they need from you to make good decisions. So one way to get in the mind of funders is to look at the kind of questions they're asking you, and common grant applications are a great source to do that. A lot of advice around grant writing is to create like a master proposal. It's a generalized proposal that includes the meat of what you generally are going to put in most of your proposals. That way you can just pull from it when you're doing individual submissions. Well, part of you developing that master grant proposal could be looking at the questions from a common grant application and using that to develop your master grant. Number 4 is have your budgets ready. You want to know the biggest thing that trip people up when they're writing grants? And do you want to know one of the first things that funders look at when they're reviewing grants? Is the budget. A lot of people are surprised that they have to submit a budget with their grant proposals, which again shows me that people aren't necessarily thinking from the perspective of the funder. They're thinking more so of themselves, because they're like, well, we don't have a budget because we don't have any money. So we don't have anything to show, so what will we be submitting? And that's kind of the mind frame of a lot of people who are just starting their nonprofit and just getting into the grant writing process. But a funder really needs to understand your financial picture, and a big part of your financial picture is how much does it cost to run your overall organization? How much does it cost to run a particular program you may be writing a grant for? Are you getting other money to support that? Are they supporting the whole project? Are they supporting part of it? Have you pulled together resources to be able to leverage the money they give you? They want to be able to see that, assess that. And at a very basic level, if you're asking for money, they want to know how it's going to be used, because they want to make sure that the money is used in a way that is in alignment with their goals. So you got to have an organizational budget in place. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Remember that a budget is an estimation. It is a projection of what you hope to spend, of what you hope to raise for your organization. You need one for your overall organization, and you need one for the particular program that you're asking money for. If you're asking for a program grant, you should be creating a budget anyway for your organization. You should have that in place. But sometimes with a program budget and you're writing a grant, you may have to adjust per submission. So maybe you are asking for grants from 5 different funders, but they want the budgets for your program to be submitted in different formats or in their template. And they may have different categories or different ways they want you to break it down. So you may have to adjust your program budget and fit it to the needs of the funder, and it will change, it will shift. So you may not be able to work on a program budget or finalize it until you're writing a specific grant, but to prepare yourself, you should be working on and have your organizational budget in place. I hope this makes sense. I actually recorded a budgeting masterclass. People really like this class because it breaks down and it shows you basically over my shoulder how to create a budget from scratch. And this is specifically for nonprofits who've never had a budget before and they feel like, well, we don't have any money in the bank, so how do we create a budget? It's the class for you. And I'll also break down in that class how to create a budget for a grant proposal. So if you're interested in that, comment budget masterclass below. I'll send you the link. But the bottom line is have your budgets ready. Know what your budget categories are, have them in some kind of spreadsheet format so it's easy to adjust, make changes, and add notes. And finally, have other documents ready to go. Grant submissions come in all different types of formats. There are all different types of expectations. There are some grants where you have to submit things online and they may want you to upload a document. Maybe they don't want any documents and they want you to answer questions. But you're absolutely going to come across grant proposals where you're going to have to submit a lot of information, like your financial statements, your 501c3 letter, maybe your certificate of good standing for your state. Maybe they want a support letter or an MOU that you have with an organization you plan to partner with. Maybe they want you to provide materials that you're going to use in your programming. Let me tell you one of the most stressful things about writing a grant. When you're near the end of the process and you got to gather all of the information to submit. It is so stressful. I don't know about you, but it makes my head spin, which is one of the reasons why I really do not like submitting grant proposals, because it can be a headache at the last minute, especially when you're behind and you're submitting things on the last day and you're like, oh snap, where is that document? Oh, you got to search on your computer and you got to find this and find this. So I recommend right now, even before you start writing, to create a folder or a set of folders with documents that you're going to typically see in a grant proposal. And there are things that I already mentioned, like your 501c3 letter, like your financial statements, which is a big one that trips people up. You need to understand what a financial statement is and start preparing those kind of things right now, because you're going to be asked for stuff like that. Your last 990 that you submitted, save it. If you have letters of support, save templates that you can give to people so they can put it on their letterhead and send it back to you. These are the types of things you just need to be prepared for that will make your process much easier. So in the past, I've broken down the 10 most common elements of a grant proposal, and I actually created a grant writing workbook. So if you want to write your first proposal, what you can do is follow those 10 areas. I have worksheets for each area, and you can start writing and doing your process with the questions that I'm asking you. So I'm basically giving you prompts to help you in your writing. If you want something like that, I can send it to you as well for you to purchase. Just comment grant writing workbook and I will also send you the link for that. So I hope this video was helpful, and my goal is for you to at least write that one grant. If you have that grant saved on your computer or bookmarked somewhere and you've been avoiding it, my challenge to you is to write that grant, because you're not going to get better at it until you start writing. If you need help with your nonprofit, visit me at bossonabudget.com. There are resources there for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.